Welcome back, peeps. I have an exciting episode today. No, I don't. But but it's a good one. So today I'm seeing a trend, and we're going to talk about this. I'm seeing a trend of when well-meaning people start making you feel guilty because you're setting boundaries. I don't know if you guys have seen this on social media. So much care goes into setting boundaries, but what happens when you've done everything to get along and boundaries have become necessary? Then, just when you think it's all good, well meaning people make you feel bad about going that route. So, I've been seeing a trend, not a trend, but I would say quite a few posts that are really honestly hurting my heart. I've been seeing in some Christian social circles on social media, different, not even people I know, not saying that. Couple maybe that I know from afar, but I don't know them. I know them in like speaker writer circles, and then just some people that I follow that I don't personally know them. But there are these Christian women I've seen like podcasts and then posts on social media talking about how some families are just cutting off their parents and alienating them from their grandkids, and how selfish that they're being, and that Satan is causing families to break apart. And I believe in that second statement because I do believe, this is why I do the work I do, is because I do believe that Satan is trying to break, kill, and destroy families. He doesn't want families. That's why he's creating all these different kinds of families that don't make sense. He doesn't want a regular, like, just whatever family. Whatever that means. I'm not getting into that. But I just think that part is true, that the family dynamic is dying and people are estranged from each other. But I don't think that setting a boundary with someone who is, I don't even want to say dangerous. We're going to get into this, but I don't think that it's up to someone else to decide where that boundary goes. And also, I understand what they're saying, because there are some people who get their feelings hurt, right? And instead of having a conversation, they get extremely sensitive and they just cut everybody off and stop communicating. That is never something that I would suggest or condone for someone. I am always on the side of, let's see where we can go with this relationship, with your mom, with your family, with anyone, to bring yourself closer and create a loving, healthy family. But there are times that is not possible. I think unless, someone is completely out of control, if your mom is completely out of control, unless you have witnessed that yourself or you've lived that yourself, you can't speak to that for someone else. I think what they're saying is they want us to just keep walking in the toxic behavior and suck it up for the family to stay together, because that's what Jesus wants. And I'm like, for who? Like, who's that benefiting? To make you feel better about humanity, for it to look good for public scrutiny. Let's go over who boundaries are for and who needs to stay out of it. And just an FYI, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I'm doing this episode anyway. So the rumor mill is, oh yes, going berserk. Because, and this may all change by the time this episode comes out, but let's start with the Beckhams. You know who I'm talking about. Maybe you don't. Victoria Beckham, Spice Girl, and her husband David are having a whole bunch of drama with their oldest son, Brooklyn, and his wife, Nicola. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because in this episode, we're talking about boundaries, and Brooklyn is setting a huge boundary and cutting off his parents because of some things that allegedly happened concerning his wife during their wedding, and I guess some other things after that. People are taking sides like they actually know what's happening in this fractured family. We don't know. We don't know these people. Even when you're friends with someone, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. You may have witnessed some things, so that's different. But do you know? You may not always know. The mother, Victoria, Posh Spice, was who she was in the Spice Girls back in the day. She's also an accomplished designer and very well loved by many. So the fact that there's family dysfunction has everyone in a tizzy because everyone just assumed they're the perfect family. They have 4 children. So this is their oldest son. And there is drama. He's not going along to get along with everybody. And who knows? He could be completely in the wrong and, or he could be telling the truth. But here's the thing with setting boundaries, which, by the way, I've written a chapter in my new book, UnMothered No More, shameless plug, that's coming out at the end of February. And I wrote a whole book on boundaries, a chapter in the new book about this. So, might want to pick up a copy. Boundaries are for you. They're not for anyone else. People can't tell you when to set a boundary. You have to decide when you're going to set a boundary. People will always have an opinion of how you should live and love your family. But at the end of the day, it's none of their business. We truly don't know what goes on behind closed doors. And then people like the Beckhams, who we have a fantasy idea of what we think their life is about, gives us a sneak peek behind the curtain. And then we think we know the whole story. So the thing that bothers me the most is I've been hearing some Christian podcasters talk about boundaries and how women are cutting off their families and, the poor grandkids and the poor grandparents, like, how dare they? They can't let them see the grandkids. They blame the person setting the boundary. And it's exactly why most people won't set boundaries. They justify the topic with legalistic opinions of how Satan is trying to destroy families and pull them apart and how we just need to fight that and keep families together. They place a line at highly abusive situations and they give an out for that. However, I don't agree with just that situation alone. They also vilify the adult children by doing this, as is the case with the Beckhams. Everyone's blaming Brooklyn, saying, he's a spoiled rich kid. How dare he? He should be so happy. As if money and power should automatically make you a happy family. You should never complain. You have everything you want. How dare you? Like, that is the stupidest, sorry, but it is. It's the stupidest excuse to completely ignore what this kid may be going through that could be true. And because he's rich and his parents are popular and rich and all the things, everyone thinks that he should be fine. It makes no sense. And then they talk about, on general, some of these podcasts, they talk about how the grandparents are these sweet, loving people and how dare they. And it's like, well, do you know that for a fact? Like, maybe they're not really nice people. I will say this. I know in some cases this could be true. And I've been seeing people abusing trauma words and terms to suit their own selfish behavior. And they throw out words that they haven't studied or learned. It's just buzzwords that they see on social media. And they're like, oh, well, she must be this. Oh, well, I'm going to say she did this. She's a gaslighter. She's this. She's that. They throw out these terms. And it's like, no one has actually studied that. You haven't gone to a therapist to see, is this actually true? Is this ask the questions. Like, don't just get mad and then cut your parents off. Like, that I totally believe. And I think that's where they were coming from. But here's the problem is that you say those things on social media and the person who is petrified to set a boundary, but they know that they have to, then goes back into themselves and goes, oh, I can't do it. People are going to get mad at me. Everyone's going to, yes, you are going to disrupt everything when you set a boundary because it's necessary, and the person hurting you does not deserve to be near you anymore at this point. And it's not just the highly abusive thing. That's where I was like, so you give an out for someone who, well, if it's sexual abuse or if it's physical abuse, yes, of course, set a boundary. Well, that's way more than a boundary. Setting a boundary, and here's the thing, if you haven't grown up with somebody who on the daily is screaming in your ear, is pushing you down to make you clean the baseboards with, back in the day, powdered Comet that's choking you, throwing you in a bathroom with bleach and all these things. And it's like, you've already cleaned this and you're cleaning it again because she's bipolar and she can't function. She hasn't gotten herself help. Your own mom hasn't gotten herself help. And so now she's tormenting you, but she's not beating you. She's not sexually abusing you. It is an emotional and verbal assault on you on the daily. She twists things around. She makes you feel crazy on the daily. And you don't want that person to set a boundary because you're supposed to love your mother and father. Yeah, but they're all supposed to be protecting and loving us too. So if you haven't lived through those things, it's easy for you to judge it and say, you shouldn't do that. You should just love your mom through it. We've tried. And sometimes you got to pull away in order for your own mental health and safety of not going crazy to be around this person. And most of the time I will say there is physical abuse in that too. There was physical abuse in our home. There were people that were trying to, ask us if we needed help. And my brother said no one time. There were neighbors that came and said, hey, we're hearing stuff that's going on. Do you need help? But then yet you don't want to set a boundary when you get older. You just want to love on that parent. It's like, yes, we want to love them, but we need to set a boundary. And a boundary doesn't mean, that's the other thing, is people are saying, oh, they're setting a boundary and they're not letting them see anybody. Well, that's not really a boundary. A boundary is, yes, you can have a boundary of no contact, but a boundary is really hey, I need a break. So a boundary was, like I've talked before, is my mom was not allowed over to my house after a certain period of time, because every time I would invite her to my home, she would create major chaos and leave me in absolute tears. And I would see her coming after my children. And I was like, absolutely not. This is not happening. But did I love my mom? Yeah. So I said, I will come to your house. And this was especially during the holidays. She would get drunk and then she would come over and she would just wreak havoc and just create all this chaos and say all these horrible things. And, it was just crazy. It's crazy. And that's the thing, is it's crazy. And you want us to just continue to let people doing that because, oh, it's your mom. Here's what I did, is I said, I will come to you. I will bring you food the next day. But I am spending Christmas Eve with my family that I am creating, and I don't want it disrupted anymore. I'm trying to create something new. So I will come to you separately. I didn't take her completely out of the loop. Also, my own children were like, we don't really want to be around grandma that much. She's not a nice person. They set their own boundaries. I was like, you know what? You're right. Once in a while, I'd say, kids, we got to go see her. They're like, okay. It was never this rude, crude thing. They were saying, she's not in her right mind to be able to love us in the way that is normal. my mom would go back in the registers of her mind and think it was me at that age and start saying these cruel things to my kids. And I'm like, Mom, these are your grandkids. But when you're dealing with someone who isn't okay, you can't love that away. You have to set a boundary. So those boundaries were really safe and secure and good. So let's look at the boundary setting for what it is. It's hard to set a boundary around a parent that just isn't good. We aren't doing this lightly without prayer or thought. We already feel guilty. We don't need some outsider to decide what is right or wrong for us spiritually. You don't know what goes on in people's homes, and it's not always abusive in the way that you think. It doesn't have to be this huge abusive thing for you to cut off your family to create mental stability in you, or, just separate, not even have to cut off. It could be a constant pull of unreasonable things that are purposely damaging your future or your well-being. Why do we have to explain to people who aren't living our lives to prove our point? We don't. In the case of the Beckhams, some people are saying that Brooklyn is a selfish brat. He's just a rich kid. He wants more. He's definitely angry at his mother, and we don't know why. But do we actually know what he wants or needs? No, we don't. And time will tell, I guess. But it's the same when Christian women automatically think that women setting boundaries around their own mothers is wrong. They should just be good Christian women and love their mother's bad behavior. I spent half my life defending some of the things that I had to do to set in place to protect my girls from a mom who didn't know better and tried to create chaos every time she entered my home. What I don't want to see is women going back into themselves and being quiet and relinquishing their own control of their families just to try to have peace, where there won't be any anyway. We can always pray for change and love in our mothers' lives. That's always open, and we should be doing that. But we don't need to let them walk all over us so that outsiders feel better about our Christian walk. That's not their job. It's not theirs to hold, and we shouldn't be responsible for that. So here's a couple tips that I have for you guys to think about. You determine when or if a boundary should be set. This isn't up for debate for a lot of people's opinions. No one knows your story except for you. Ask God to show you the next steps. And don't get stuck in what other people think is best for you. Make sure that you know what a healthy relationship looks like. And study what a healthy boundary looks like. It's not about cutting off people completely unless necessary. I created a good boundary around my mom coming to my home because she was so toxic, but I still took care of her for 16 years. It's not about being cruel. Just don't let people impart that in your mind. It's loving for all parties. What I don't want is a conversation from strangers telling me what's more Christian and righteous when it comes to my life. I have listened to God's voice and his opinion for the last 32 years. I know the difference, and I know when others are speaking from their own pain and experiences, which have nothing to do with mine. Know the difference. So I hope this episode was helpful to you. If somebody is bullying you and saying that you shouldn't set boundaries, that you shouldn't separate yourself from your parents, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, I hope that you take the time to really know the difference between what you're thinking and what someone else is thinking, because this life is yours. So the boundary setting is completely up to you. You're the only one that has lived your life, and you trust where God wants you and where the direction you need to go. So I hope this episode helped you. I know it was kind of eye-opening for me. I hope the Beckhams are okay because that is very stressful as a family. So Godspeed to them. And until next time, peeps, we'll see you later.